This is Mark Gansle, and you're listening to My Friend the Friar with John Lee and Father Stephen Sanchez, a discalced Carmelite priest.
Okay, so where are the cats? Let's figure out where the cats are.
They're scared of Mark.
They are. I came and fed them for a week with Grant, and they never came out. Like, actually, I think they were out like the first time, and then after that, they never came out.
Oh, okay.
That's weird. They must be able to like sense evil or something.
Ah, they read souls, do
I've
they?
got two cats that get right on top of me every day.
Well, maybe that's what it is. I mean, they probably smell the other cats on you.
It could be.
Yeah.
Could be it. Yeah,
could be.
because he has no cats and they love him.
Yeah.
Well, Lenny does. The others, have the others ever?
Mostly Lenny.
Yeah.
Lenny. The others will come around, but it's Lenny that will climb on me.
Yeah.
Father Paul came over for dinner one time and desperately wanted the attention from one of those cats. And you know those cats are pretty chill and like will get up on top of anybody.
Yeah.
But
Especially
he was too. It's like that little old story about how Charlie made Topsy love him because he used to love on the cat. It's an old. I had a book of stories when I was a kid, and this is a story basically about like if you pay too much attention to your cat, you don't let the cat go. Like if you're not a little bit aloof, the cat's gonna not love you. And so like he went to some land where a giant girl like made him his pet and loved on him the way he loved on Topsy, and then he realized that that's terrible.
Could you do me a favor? Could you say in the most country accent you can, "Who is the angel of the Lord"?
Who is the angel of the Lord? Why? What is that from?
From Betty.
Betty.
She was walking around saying it in a country accent the other day, like over and over and over again. She's just like, "Who is the angel of the Lord?" Is amazing. Is amazing. All right. Well, what are we waiting for?
I don't know.
You know what's weird is because we've already done this once.
Your setup. Yeah.
We've had this issue before, and the trick is because we've already had this conversation before. There's a temptation to try to like replicate whatever it is that we just got done doing.
So make believe we haven't done this before.
Just have the conversation.
Right. Well, and luckily, like I'm elderly and I can't remember that far back. So
Yeah, I have a hard time remembering too. There was some stuff that was good. It was good. So, technical difficulties.
Robin was disappointed.
Was she?
She was.
Well, we'll get her on,
She
and we'll
also
lose
has
her
said
recordings
we
too.
need to have a photograph of this event because she said you could put it in the show notes because people are going to want to see our picture after they hear all of our voices. And I said that is absolutely not true.
That's such a woman thing to think of. Like pictures. Let's have pictures.
It's like you need to have a picture. Like the three of you together doing your podcast, you should have a picture of that.
Yeah. You know what though? I think that is exactly why God made Eve for Adam, because Adam's bumbling around, can't remember what he's supposed to be doing. He's like, I need a woman to like help him remember what he's supposed to do and what he already did. And she was like, oh my goodness, let's take pictures. And then we know how it all worked out. So
Yeah. So much for that.
yeah.
So are you saying that taking pictures is responsible for the fall?
Exactly. It was an iPhone that was.
Is that one of those logical necessities Father Stephen keeps talking about?
Yes.
I don't think that. I'm not sure I follow your logic.
If this, then that. Right?
You started watching Babylon 5 yet? No.
No, I can't find it. It's not, you can't, well.
Yes, you can.
Not for free.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Okay. Oh, okay. It has to be free. Okay.
Or on a service you're already paying for?
That's what I'm trying to say. So, can't download it on, or stream it on like Hulu or Netflix or whatever stuff we're already paying for. I can buy it probably. Is it worth buying if I bought the whole, how many seasons is it? It was like 2 or something, or it was short because it was like a planned story.
It was an arc that was supposed to go 3 years. So maybe it's 4 or 5 seasons. I don't remember now. But, they ditched the last year, and so they had to cram the guy. And this was the beautiful thing about it: the guy that wrote the whole arc for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then they just started following the arc, and
Was it supposed to be something before a TV show? You know, how sometimes like somebody writes a book and they're like, "Let's make it into a TV."
No, I think it was created for. Oh, did you get the music video I sent you?
Yes, that was super cool, and I don't know how it's it's a choir at a mass
St. Bart's.
singing Isaiah, but it's like
in the year King Uzziah died, and the
Yeah.
reason because we brought it up yesterday when we were talking about angels.
Yeah.
Right? You brought it up.
yeah.
I didn't say anything during the podcast, but that is the hymn that they sang at my ordination.
Really?
Yeah.
What I thought was most impressive, I'll send it to you after because it's worth listening to. What's most impressive is that it's 8 verses, and the song is 8 minutes long. So they somehow turn every verse into like
It's 5
60
seasons.
seconds. Say what?
5 seasons.
5 seasons for Babylon. Is it worth buying?
I mean, it's a really, really interesting story in terms of talking about temptation and fallenness and all that other stuff. And so the reason we started talking about this was we're talking about angels the other day.
Right.
And did you listen to the podcast?
I've started it.
Okay, so in part of it, we're talking about how angels manifest, or do they have eyes? Do they have wings that have eyes? Well, no. This reminds me of
Biblically accurate.
so this reminds me of this show Babylon 5, where there's this one ambassador from one of these races, and nobody knows what they look like, because the only way you see them is they come into contact with you in what they call the encounter suit. So you have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
And so this whole thing is that they're going through this, and so they're very intelligent. They have organic ships. Their ships are alive, and so their ships are organic. And so the whole thing is about the whole idea of fallenness, and it's really the cosmic battle between good and evil. And so you have different races are beginning to side with good and evil, and some are very manipulative and political and stuff, and tempting people with power and stuff. And so it's a very great look at that at the cosmic battle between good and evil. In one of the episodes,
Spoiler alert.
in one of the episodes, one of the protagonists is caught up in a chairlift, but it's like a monorail stuff, and somebody has attempted to assassinate him, and so it blows up the rail and stuff, and he's about to fall, and so the Vorlon is there, and the Vorlon sees, and the Vorlon knows that this is a good guy, and he's essential to their plan in continuing to fight the evil that's coming. There's this huge evil that's coming across, that's coming into the storyline. So as this captain begins to fall, the Vorlon opens up his encounter suit, and he flies up. He's an angel. He flies up and catches the captain and brings him down. And every race recognizes, they see the angel according to their cultural understanding of what an angelic or spiritual being is, except for the evil races that are siding with the evil. They didn't see anything. So it was very interesting.
That's interesting.
It's a very interesting story.
It is. It's interesting how, and I sometimes wonder how unconscious or unintentional like those derivative works are.
Right.
That like and sometimes I mean you can tell when they're doing it very intentionally, like C.S. Lewis, but or even there's a science fiction author. Her name is Julian May, and she wrote about basically higher mind powers, and she like very intentionally including theology in it and the idea of theology, and like she references like Teilhard de Chardin, who's a Jesuit priest and author, and I think he was like somebody they accused him of being associated with the Piltdown Man scam, but like she just like incorporates all this, and so you see that. But then like this series, like is it just, hey, angels are a neat idea, or like are they purposely trying to incorporate the theology of the church into that storyline?
Right.
I guess we got to watch and find out.
If you can find it, you know.
Yeah. Without spending an arm and a leg.
It's 5 seasons.
BitTorrent.
Hey, I've been looking for a show to watch. I don't care if it's got hokey 90s special effects.
You might be able to find, I think they made a movie of it. You might be able to find a movie because I think at the very end they made a movie about that or a pilot or something. So, yeah. They called The Gathering or something is what it was. So,
So Mark, you're with us because you're joining the Swiss Guard.
Yes, because I think I'm going to look good in the uniform.
Yeah, all 8 feet of you. You're discerning the diaconate.
Yes, the permanent diaconate.
The permanent diaconate.
Obviously not eligible to discern the transitional diaconate.
Because you married.
That's right.
I guess much to Robin's disdain, she can't get rid of you. She's stuck with you.
She is stuck with me.
Yeah.
She puts a good face on it.
She does. She does. So, I guess the best place to start is your childhood. No. Like why?
I think probably what I would ask is, in terms of what has brought you to the consideration of discerning the permanent diaconate, and of course, did chirp have anything to do with that?
Yeah, because we're all chirp brothers.
That's right. So the answer, of course, is yes, it did, but it's not the only thing. It's a hard question. I mean, we talk about discernment as kind of, Catholic jargon, like in talk. But I actually had Deacon Ron's wife had asked me at one point pretty early on, "Hey, how's your discernment going?" And I said, I didn't really have an answer for that because I'm not sure I know, what it's supposed to look like. I don't know that I know or have ever been catechized on what does it mean to discern and how do you discern appropriately. And so that was a kind of a really difficult question to start with, especially since I didn't know much about the diaconate. Other than, what I see. And what I see is the deacon in his dalmatic at Mass serving at the altar.
So was there something that was attractive about that, or was there something that preceded that, which was just this desire to do something in service to God? Like, what do you think? Or maybe both. I don't know.
So I'm a cradle Catholic, and I was an altar server growing up, and I don't think there's any little boy who's an altar server who hasn't thought about the priesthood, right? Even if it's, really short. I think that's, kind of natural. Like you're there and you're there serving with the priest. I obviously did not go down that path. And I will say, as a part of participating in Christ Renews His parish, as a part of just participating more in ministry within the parish, those kinds of things have helped me to think more about how do I grow closer to God? What are the things that I can do that that help me to do that? But what are also the things that are kind of a natural consequence of growing closer? What are the things that I'm drawn towards? What are the activities that I want to engage in? Okay. It absolutely helped that Deacon Ron invited me to consider it. That it was actually John and I and Sandeep in the room when Deacon Ron says, "Have any of you ever thought about the diaconate?" And that kind of planted a seed. So I wanted to learn more. So I started reading. Deacon Ron suggested some books. Deacon Vince, who's kind of the deacon in charge of the diaconate program for the diocese.
The formation program here.
That's right. They both suggested some really good books. And so, I mean, some of them are very scholastic. They, some of them, like a couple of them had this kind of wither the diaconate tone, like this very erudite discussions around the diaconate, the purpose of the diaconate, and those kinds of things. Some of them have been very pastoral. One was the story of one woman's journey as the wife of a deacon early on in, I think it was in Wisconsin. But those things have helped to clarify, well, what is the diaconate and what is it about, and what would life in the diaconate be like, which I think is a really important part of that. The other thing, which again Deacon Ron suggested, is if you want to know if you're drawn to pastoral ministry, go engage in pastoral ministry. Go do it. So I've been very active in the permanent Eucharistic adoration since Chirp in extraordinary minister of Holy Communion, but he said, go join the communion for sick and homebound. So I've been doing that for a while. And it is clarifying. It helps me to understand more about what would that pastoral ministry look like. And I think it's important to understand the diaconate has, just like any other vocation, just like the priesthood, just like our vocation in the married life, there are these three duties, these three munera. And it relates to the priest, the prophet, and the king. So the duty to offer sacrifice to the Lord, to sacrifice our lives to the Lord and to others, seeing Jesus in others, to make those spiritual sacrifices, to give up the good parts of your day and offer that up, and the bad parts of your day, and where you had to carry a cross and where you got to experience joy. The prophet, speaking the gospel. And I think so many people hear the word prophet and they think fortune teller or futurist or something, as opposed to somebody who speaks
a seer,
a seer, not somebody who speaks the truth, declares the truth. But we all have that duty, and then as a part of that discernment around the priest, the prophet, the king, around those duties, I've learned a lot more about what it means to be a part of the diaconate, because what I see at Mass is the deacon assisting at the altar. What I see at the Mass is the deacon preaching the gospel.
You see the liturgical aspect of it.
Right. I just see the liturgical aspect. And there's so the diaconate is not, it used to be a path along towards the priesthood, but as originally envisioned, as originally constituted in the church in the early days, in the patristic days, and as a part of post-Vatican II, the deacon is meant to clearly have his own roles, his own vocation that is not kind of like priest light,
right,
or
right.
assistant priest or something like that.
Yeah.
So the deacon's role is to preach the gospel. It is to serve at Mass in the liturgy of the Mass, as well as in other liturgical roles, like in sacramentals and sacraments, and then to serve. So a deacon, the priest serves in persona Christi, but it's actually in persona Christi Capiti, so in Christ the head. The deacon is ordained to serve in the person of Christ the servant. And that role, the reason that we have deacons, is for the deacon to be a symbol to the members of the church that we all have that responsibility to serve in the person of Christ the servant.
Yeah, that's something that there's something kind of along the lines of that too that you've said before, is like you think all men should be discerning. Well, so all men would benefit from discerning the diaconate, right? Because it is very similar to like I would imagine like a nun, right? It's just this elevated form, even though it is consecrated for the deacon, but it's like this elevated form of laity for the nuns, right? So for all men to be living like they're discerning the diaconate, it's calling you to this elevated form of how I should be living my life as a Christian man.
Right.
Right.
The process in particular, I think, is I think the things that you do when you're discerning the diaconate, and I would assume this is true for the priesthood as well, are things that they're good spiritual practices that everybody should learn about, but we don't necessarily drive that. Like, we don't have a comprehensive adult education program in the church where we're continuing through catechism and development. Like, it's all very
Podcasty,
yeah.
In consecrated life, it's called ongoing formation. So
Yeah.
you continue to deepen your understanding. But I think one of the things too that to take into consideration is whatever vocation of service you discern that you're being called to, that it all is based upon your fundamental baptismal call. And so again, like the priesthood of the lay people, right? There is the common priesthood that every baptized person participates in. And then it's a matter of, okay, so, but is God calling me to, we're all called to a life of service, but the discernment or the process of trying to listen to the personalized call, where in the body of Christ is God calling me to serve? So is it as a single celibate person? Is it as a consecrated person? Is it as a married person? Is it as a priest? Is it as a permanent deacon? But all of those are ways in which the baptismal call or the baptismal obligation to serve begins to bear fruit. Yeah. So how is that? And so part of the discernment then for the permanent diaconate then is like, is this a way in which do I believe that God is calling me to sanctification and redemption through this way? Right.
Yeah. It's weird because this is it's not weird. I don't know why I said that. Language, right? But there's three parts to, and this is true not just for you discerning the diaconate, but it is true. There's the vocation itself, like what is this vocation? What is this way of life, right? What is this way of being an active member of the church, right? Then there is yourself, right? Because some people go, well, I want to get married, but that doesn't mean that you
Correct.
should be married,
Correct.
right?
Right.
And then how the two come together, right? How do you live out that part? So I don't know, it's really interesting. So in this case, with the diaconate, you are recognizing, and I don't think it's wrong, it's like maybe the thing that attracted you to it may have been a seed that was planted, but it may also just be, I saw the deacon at Mass, and I think that's cool.
Right.
Right? Like, and I think that's okay, because God calls to you in the things that you're interested in.
Yeah.
But then there's so much more that you're learning about, like what it means to be a deacon.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that at times we want God to say something to us in an extraordinary way.
Huh.
Yeah.
And that's the temptation, right? But the fact that you see a deacon and you begin to think about that, you see a priest when we're altar service, whatever, and you begin to consider that. Those are ordinary means of revelation, ordinary means that God uses to bring us to some sort of consideration or a deeper reflection on our baptismal call. And so I think, as Mark was saying, is that as he's discerning this, the whole idea, and for us, for us as a church, this is a very new renewal, because it had been suppressed, and then Second Vatican Council, Pope Paul VI sort of wanted it to be part of the renewal of the church, was to actually bring back the permanent diaconate and eliminate the subdiaconate and porter and sacristan and all those other steps, the minor orders towards the priesthood, and to emphasize that there's the permanent diaconate, which goes back to the early church, because a lot of people refuse to accept the fact that the Second Vatican Council was mostly about going back to the early church practices, right? And so that's part of this whole idea, and sort of getting people more involved, more responsible
Yeah.
for their own commitment.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before. We've talked about how the church, through time, evolves. Right, our understanding of Revelation changes. We understand better. Right, so then all sorts of things change over time, but that doesn't mean that it's always. I kind of think of it kind of like evolution. Right, it doesn't mean it's just always getting better. Right, sometimes you can go a little too far,
Right.
and you need to
Correct.
go back some.
Yeah, you
right?
have to correct your trajectory.
Yeah, and so the diaconate was, scriptural, like Bible early,
Right.
And there was even deaconesses, right? Well, because they were baptism. Once upon a time, they were either
It was full immersion, and
you're either not very clothed or you weren't clothed at all, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, so early in the church, obviously you've got the Acts of the Apostles where the 7 Hellenic deacons were commissioned because the Greek women weren't getting fairly treated.
Yeah, the widows and
Yeah.
During the distribution. So when you read about the early diaconate, the deacon's role is very much like chief operating officer or chief of staff.
Right.
Right. So like Rome was originally divided into these 7 districts, and each district had a deacon. So St. Lawrence, who is the deacon who famously brought out the poor when he was asked, bring me the treasures of the church.
Yeah, who was asking for it though? Because they were getting attacked or something, right?
It was under one of the emperors, but I forget who it was a Roman officer who basically wanted to sack the church and get its gold and thinking of the gold and silver and everything, right? And so I think it was under Pope Sixtus, I'm not sure. It might have been Sixtus, who was martyred. It was Pope Sixtus was martyred first with a couple of other deacons. And Lawrence, they kept Lawrence because he was, as Mark says, he was the chief operator. I'm already ordaining you. So he was the guy in charge. And so they asked him to bring the treasures that they wanted, the treasures of the church. And so, as Mark says, he gathered all the poor.
Yeah.
So early in the church, you've got these deacons, and they've got like a ton of power. More than you would expect from what the role really was, which, it's not the presbyterate. And I think that there became this view, kind of this ladder of progression view, right? Kind of like, hey, if you work at a company, you're going to be an individual contributor and then a manager, and then like you'll continue to progress up the ladder. And so that's what this diaconate ended up turning into. And so, like Father said, it's with Vatican II, the idea was we're going to return back to the scriptural and capital T traditional roots of the diaconate, which was its own vocation. Yes. It is holy orders. The men are ordained to the role, but it's not just a step to the presbyterate. And the idea has never been and should never be, if I become a priest, I'm really not living out my full potential if I don't then become a bishop and then a cardinal, right? Like that's not the way it's supposed to work. That's not the point of those roles. Each one has, as you said, each one has their own manifestation of what their baptismal mission is. And I loved Father Kevin used to talk during some of his homilies about like the obligation to go to Sunday Mass and why it's an obligation under the auspices of justice, and this idea that God has given us so much that through pure justice we're obligated to give back, and that is true of our baptismal duties, those 3 munera, that we must be giving back. And even when you think about how many Catholic married couples don't understand that the purpose of that vocation is not to make new Catholic children. It's to get each other to heaven. Like, you're making that commitment. Like, that is your part of building the church here on earth. And even that, you're the one who actually executes that. You're the one who celebrates that sacrament.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The deacon or the priest can be there to observe witness it. Right. The priest can celebrate the mass, but it's you that's doing that. And so, so part of the reason why I had said I think everybody should discern the diaconate is because I think everybody should be undertaking those spiritual exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should be understanding what the church teaches more. Everybody should be trying to find ways to grow closer to God, to improve their spiritual life, their prayer life, their interior life. Everybody should pray the divine office. Everybody should be doing these things because it has such goodness in it for everybody and their spiritual life, and will help draw them closer to the ultimate end, which is God. So I don't think that every man should give serious consideration to the diaconate. Obviously, that's not the call for every man, but I think every person, every Christian has to be undertaking some of those activities if they want to fulfill their baptismal mission, their promises.
Yeah. So why, if the church was trying to remove all these steps to, like, you become a deacon so you can become a priest, so you can become a bishop, like, right, they're trying to get rid of that that feeling, necessity of promotion, right? So then why is the diaconate necessary for the priesthood?
As a transitional role?
Yeah.
It goes back to the whole idea of service. The whole idea as you're discerning, right? So part of it is you're called to service, but you're called to service. It is when you ordain to priesthood, you don't stop being ordained to service. Your service then now is transmorgified, using Calvin and Hobbes' language. It is transmorgified into a service as the leader of the liturgy and as leader, right?
Yeah.
Sharing in the leadership of the bishop.
But you can't become a deacon, a transitional deacon, and then pause. Well, I mean, could you? Could you become a deacon and then go, whoa,
like, you can discern out of the priesthood?
Yeah, you can discern out of the transitional diaconate.
Okay.
But you cannot discern out of the permanent diaconate.
Right, because there's that indelible mark.
So that's I guess what I'm kind of wondering. So is there still the indelible mark on your soul if you're transitioning?
So when you are ordained, you are incarnated into service under a bishop, or in the case of like the friary, to the ordinary of that religious order, right? So basically the Carmelite bishop, if you will, right? And so the bishop is in charge and can say, well, you don't have to serve, or you can take a break, or you've got health problems and we're going to put a pause on those obligations.
So if you're ordained to the transitional diaconate, right, and you discern out, you're still a deacon. But the bishop then basically legislates or laicize, that you're no longer obliged to ministry or to obedience to him, right? The same thing as a priest. If a priest would be laicized to say, okay, I've served for 30 years, like, okay, it's time for me to retire to my home in Costa Rica. So you're still a priest.
Yeah.
But you're no longer in service. You're no longer obligated to the ministry. But I get you. I see your question, and that's a question I've never really thought about, is that why is the transitional diaconate necessary before priesthood? And it is. You can't be ordained straight to priest, just like you can't be ordained straight to bishop without being a priest, without being a transitional deacon. So
part of it is probably because we have ordinary ministers of sacraments and sacramentals and different parts of the Mass, right? The ordinary preacher of the gospel is not the priest.
Yeah,
It
thanks
is the
to
deacon.
Vatican II, right? Yeah, now we're way more involved. Yeah, so now it's the deacon who
Right.
is
There. If you think about during the consecration, the deacon hands the bread to the priest before he elevates it and consecrates it. He pours the water and the wine into the cup and hands it to the priest before the priest elevates. And so there's a certain, correct me if I'm wrong, Father, but I think there's a certain idea, there's a sentiment of humility that, we're not really worthy to offer this. And so by having somebody else participate in that, it reminds the priest that they're not, without Christ, they're not worthy to consecrate.
Right.
And so there are these roles where the priest may serve in that, but they're really fulfilling their diaconal ordination when they serve that in that role. So the deacons got those obligations, and I think that there's value as well in the formation process. So before you become a deacon, transitional or permanent, you are instituted in as lector and instituted as acolyte. So those are actually official titles above and beyond kind of lay fulfillment of those roles, right? So we've got lectors at Mass that typically are not instituted in a formal way, although...
But you could be like the official lector.
Right. And I think strictly speaking, the priest is supposed to institute any lectors and any Eucharistic ministers.
Who is?
The priest.
The priest, okay.
At any parish. When I serve at the altar as an extraordinary, outside of the ordinary, minister of Holy Communion, I am serving in a portion of the role of the acolyte. If you've seen, like back when Manny and William, before they were ordained, like they were up on the altar and they were in the black cassock and the white surplice, and serving at the altar. And that was in role of acolyte, right? And so those roles are steps, and a part of what discernment means is not just you alone discerning, but the people around you who own the responsibility there also discerning, right? And so me serving in a pastoral role, in the Diocese of Dallas, it's a 6-year process to become a deacon. There's a year in aspirancy as an aspirant. A year in inquiry, and then 2 years in aspirancy, and then 3 years in candidacy before you would ever be ordained. And that entire time, you're meeting with priests who's running the program, potentially other priests. You have to have a priest as your spiritual advisor. Can't be just any old spiritual advisor. It has to be a priest. You are participating in formation, in pastoral formation, corporal and spiritual works of mercy. And again, the entire time you're discerning, but you're not discerning alone.
You're being examined. There's an inquiry. And when you get to the actual ritual of ordination.
I thought you were going to say the written test. It's like, whoa, what?
There's some of those, but that's not, that's not the way you get ordained.
So when you get to the actual ritual, part of the question that the bishop will say is like, is this person worthy? And then the person that represents the whole process of your formation says, this person has been examined and has been found worthy. And in that one sentence, the person is saying like, yeah, for the past 5-6 years, yeah, we've been at it long and hard, trying to figure out what are the motivations. Why is this person attracted to this? Does this person have the capacity for it? Does this person have the gifts to serve in the way that this person feels called to serve? So yeah,
it's like super RCIA.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and it probably wouldn't hurt if, I don't know how many people would ever get married, but man,
Oh my gosh, I know, I've thought about that so much. But what's really interesting, and so there has to be some kind of like God knows what he's doing thing going on here. If I'll go ahead and speak for my wife, so that way I'm not saying it about her because I love her and she's perfect. But if she had to spend like 10 years with me or whatever to figure out if I'm worth it, like I would not be married, right? Like she would have been like, pass, right? So the
Hard pass.
yeah,
Yeah.
like super hard pass. So that desire to jump in ignorance to marriage, like there's got to be something Holy Spirit driven there.
Oh, for
Otherwise,
sure.
it probably wouldn't happen because all of us would be looking at each other going, "Nope," right?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't
Absolutely.
hurt. It definitely wouldn't hurt if people slowed down a little.
No, they should, but I think part of it. Okay, let's not. Here we go. So
Get them.
just open the can of worms. There has been attempts to lengthen the period of instruction, but there's such pushback that most people don't really understand what they're asking for. Basically, all they're worried about is, I need this date, and I already booked this date at this venue, and I've already put down $8,000 on this venue, and so I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to that date, right? So I'm like, well, that's not what it's about, but okay. So there have been attempts at trying to make this longer, and it really depends upon the diocese too, I think, in terms of what their requirements are. But there should be interviews with, I think in this diocese, I think you have a married couple that sponsors you for a while. Yes. And so there's that. There should be the interviews or the catechizing with the minister or the priest.
Or are often the deacon, right?
Right,
Like that's
a
an
deacon
important part of the
marriage
munus
prep.
docendi is that duty to teach is that role of prophet.
Right.
The deacon is supposed to serve in the parish. And the reason so many deacons are attached to parishes is because they're there to help with
Right.
instruction for RCIA, instruction for marriage. In fact, one of the pastoral assignments you always get is an RCIA assignment in the diocese before you were ever ordained. So it is, as much as it would be great for that, I think, you're also not being sealed with the Holy Spirit to act in the person of Christ in the same way during marriage.
True.
And it is, and you've got to make sure that the men who are discerning that, like Father said, are not doing it out of ego or pride or some sort of need for validation and emptiness in their life that is ultimately, you don't want that to be covering for some sort of psychological concern that they need to be addressing in some other way, right? So there's this extended period to give the men the chance to discern that, but then to give the bishop, who ultimately has the responsibility to say, yes, this person is worthy. And I have to read. So if you go back and read Acts of the Apostles, I'm sorry, no, not Acts of the Apostles. First letter of St. Paul to Timothy, he says, deacons likewise must be serious, not double-tongued, not addicted to much wine, not greedy for gain. All right, so some of those are like, those seem like pretty low bars. They must hold the mystery of faith with a clear conscience, and let them also be tested first. Then if they prove themselves blameless, let them serve as deacons. Let deacons be the husband of one wife. Let them manage their children and their households well. And then the Didache, I think. Didache. Says, elect for yourselves bishops and deacons worthy of the Lord, meek men, not lovers of money, honest and proven. And St. Polycarp says, they should be blameless before the face of his righteousness as being servants of God and Christ and not of men. They must not be slanderers, double-tongued, lovers of money, must be temperate in all things, compassionate, industrious. Like there's this lengthy list of attributes that I don't know that I fit 100%, right? But on the other hand, like who does? Like all of us are not worthy at all. I mean, we're not worthy of Christ's sacrifice for us. We're not worthy of redemption, right? We're made worthy by God. And so like it's scary to think about, like that's who I'm supposed to be. But it's also comforting to read Paul, keep saying like, I know I'm not any of that, but my weakness just helps to manifest Christ's glory, because in him
His power
I'm
is
made into
perfect.
that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, I think, a really good place for us to take a break, and we've talked about the diaconate, what it is, the vocation. So now we can come back next time and we can talk about why you want to do this.
Cool.
I think that's going to be a good break.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining, everybody, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless.